Nigel Farage, head of the UK Independence Party. Do you just want the UK to leave the European Union, or do you want to bring down the whole edifice of the EU?
Well, when I first came here, all the way back in '99, it was perfectly clear that we did not want Britain to be part of political union, and that was our objective, beginning, middle, end. My views changed over the course of the last 9 years, and I think this is because I've been part of a Eurosceptic group here. I've been involved in the French referendum, I've been involved in the Dutch referendum, I've been involved in the Irish referendum, and I now have the view that I don't just think political union is a bad thing for Britain, I think it's a bad thing for the continent of Europe. So our first priority is that Britain regains its independence, but I don't believe this is good for the other countries. So I would like to see a completely different kind of Europe. And it's not a question of wrecking things or destroying things. I want a Europe based on, let's say, the Council of Europe, where sovereign states sit together around a table and make and come to, sensible agreements. What I don't want is a structure where we have unelected commissioners effectively acting as the government of Europe.
Well, all right, let's take this point of democratic first. You say the commissioners are unelected. That's manifestly true.
Yes.
That's manifestly true. But we're sitting here in the Parliament, full of elected representatives. The Parliament are a vital part of the triangle of the three institutions. The Council is a vital part, and that's the member states themselves. Aren't you really overplaying the Commission's hand in all this?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And I'll tell you why. It's the Commission that has the sole ability to propose legislation and to propose the repeal of legislation. What this Parliament does is it goes through the legislation, it changes the grammar, it shifts things around, it's able to delay things a bit. I mean, the European Parliament is rather like the House of Lords in the UK. It's an amending chamber, but it doesn't actually have the ability to propose legislation. And had the people behind the European project had any vision at all, they would have used the European Constitution to democratise the entire European Union. And they might have just been able to sell that to the peoples of Europe. What they've done is to reinforce the very method that Monnet set up over 50 years ago.
Well, what would you replace it with? Are you seriously suggesting a completely atomistic Europe where everybody just goes their own way, or is there some level of collaboration, cooperation?
The sort of great myth is that somehow UKIP are isolationists, we want to sort of pull the drawbridge up at Dover. This is nonsense. Our view is a Europe where we trade together, where we behave as good neighbours to each other, and where we sit round the table, as we do in NATO, for example. We sit round the table using a vehicle like the Council of Europe, and we can agree minimum standards, and we can agree environmental cooperation. We can do all of those things, but what we don't want is to have a system whereby the Commission proposes legislation, it becomes European law, and frankly, whether you live in Britain or France or Denmark, who you vote for at the next general election becomes increasingly irrelevant. So it's a completely different kind of Europe that I'm talking about.
The reputation you have, I mean, not just you personally, but the reputation that the group has, if you like, is somehow of the clowns, the little boys who say the rude words in church, the tanks outside the Conservative Party conference. Yeah. It's all good PR, one can't deny that, but it's not serious politics.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, myself and my colleagues, we're not professional politicians. We haven't gone through the same route as everybody else.
You look remarkably like a professional politician.
I'm a businessman. I've come into politics because I don't feel anybody represents me. And what we're seeing with the big parties, not just in Britain but across Europe, we're seeing this sort of professional politician. They're interchangeable with bureaucrats and technocrats. My goodness me, they are the dullest, most boring people, most humourless people I've ever met in my life. And so if you're asking me to apologise for occasionally having a sense of humour, I'm just not going to.
No, what I'm really saying is that there's a danger that you're perceived as being jolly good at stunts, but there isn't really very much policy underneath. Apart from the sort of 4 legs good, 2 legs bad approach of Europe bad, us good.
I think if you look,
where's the depth? Where's the meat?
I think if you look at what the Independence and Democracy Group did in the Irish referendum, you'll see where the substance was. We put together an 8-page information booklet done in very simple terms, and we posted that out to 1.9 million households in Ireland, telling them the truth about the Lisbon Treaty, the truth about the powers that it would transfer. And I think whilst numerically we may be small. I think the influence that we had in the Irish referendum was very big indeed.
Come the elections in June 2009, if you don't make significant advances, will you give up and going back to be a commodity broker?
If we have a very bad time next year, I will resign as leader of UKIP. There's absolutely no question about that. Of course I will. There are many other things in life.
This is on tape, you know.
Absolutely. No, I'm perfectly happy to say that. Of course. You know, my reputation as leader of UKIP is dependent on the results of those elections next year. I'm under no illusions about that. This may be the first place that I've said it, but I have no reservations about doing so. Yeah, there are many other things I could do in life. Earning a salary of £61,000 a year, I was only more when I was 21. So, you know, I'm not doing this for the money. I'm doing it because I believe in it. But I will say this to you, that in the absence of a referendum, a promised referendum on this European treaty, the first and perhaps only opportunity that the British people are going to get to express an opinion on that will be the European elections next year. Now, we've got a lot of things to organise, to get right. We've got fundraising to do. We've got to get the messages so that they're clear and so that they're positive. But I think our potential is we could do very much better, even than we did in 2004.
Now, to be even-handed on this, let's assume you do better. What more can you actually do than you do at the moment? Okay, you've got some more MEPs. There's just more of you wearing silly hats or coloured T-shirts or disrupting proceedings. It's just more little boys saying rude words.
No, come on. I mean, you know, Frank, I think that's rather derogatory. I think if you look at the Independence and Democracy Group, and not just the Brits, but all the different constituent parts, if you look at how active we've been through committees, through plenary, through media, here and back in our national parliaments, you know, I think that if ever there was such a thing as the taxpayer getting value for money out of this place, I think we've provided it. What UKIP have done in a British sense is, by us existing, just as when Jimmy Goldsmith existed before, we have shifted the centre of gravity in British politics on this great European question. You know, when I first started doing this back in 93, 94, people thought that I was either mad or bad, or perhaps a bit of both, and Euroscepticism was a minority sport. If you look at recent opinion polls, you now have 2/3 of Britons want a different relationship with the European Union. It's exactly the model that UKIP's proposing. We want to be friendly, we want to trade, we want to cooperate, we do not want to be governed by these institutions. So I think we've made an enormous difference, and I think if we get an even bigger vote in 2004, what we'll be able to do is to put enormous pressure on the British establishment in Britain, so much so that it could become the issue that decides who wins the next general election. And at that point, we get into a position where we can say to these big parties, give us, if you win the election, give us a referendum. And I think UKIP has the opportunity in June 2009 to force that onto the agenda in British politics.
Nigel Farage, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.